Okay, I'm going to show you how I go about creating a Legion Desolator. So basically a legionary with a bolt pistol and a chain sword, using a kind of combination of the Horus Heresy Mark 6 armour and some Chaos Space Marine arms. Now the reason I'm using the Chaos Space Marine arms is because these are going to be Night Lords, and I just feel that they kind of just say, I suppose they project kind of gang mentality with the style and the design of the arms, but there are parts of them that I don't want because they're too Chaos Space Marine. So I'm going to start off kind of things that I've got. So I've got a bit of modelling putty here ready. I've got the model pretty much all prepared. This is pose 1, I think it is. And I'm going to start off by just sort of, hopefully you can see here, the kind of things that I don't want are the very Chaos Space Marine designs. So you can see things like these here, they just don't quite match the aesthetic of the Horus Heresy. So, got a bit of a mould line I didn't remove there. Okay, so this is basically how I'm going to go about doing it. First things first, I'm going to get rid of these. So start off just by trimming them down a bit. It's an absolute pain on these models because they're so small details, and when you don't want details in the very, very small, you kind of trying to work them away and get rid of them. As I said, they're so small though, you always feel like you're going to, one slight slip of this knife and that's it. I'm running for tissue to stop the bleeding. Yeah, so can you see that? I'm just trying to get those kind of proper Chaos Space Marine edges away. I'll properly file them down in a little bit as well so that they're nice and smooth. And then on the gauntlets here, although I really do like the actual gauntlet itself with the upwards flow, and that looks really good for Night Lords, unfortunately, again, the little bits where they spike slightly, I don't want them. So again, I'm just going to very gently remove them. Later on I'll file that down a bit. And I'm just basically removing anything that comes across as slightly too Chaos Space Marine. Now, I've actually seen people go completely insane before now, converting Chaos Space Marines back into regular Space Marines. Gosh, they've like smoothed everything. I swear I saw a Typhus model lovingly and painstakingly denerglified back into his Typhon form. So that's how insane details some people go into. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to get rid of these little bits here. You can see I'm just very carefully removing these, and that just kind of removes the little spiky bits that make it scream that it's too Chaos Space Marine. And it's just a matter of being obviously persistent and looking for anything that kind of stands out. Now again, on the weapon, I'm just going to double check yet, so there's more bits on this side that, as I said, are just far too Chaos Space Marine. I think I need to replace the blade on my knife here. It's getting blunt on the tip, and I really need a sharp tip for things like this. It's that kind of level of detail that people are going to notice. Maybe not obviously, they're not going to kind of say, wow, you've spent ages carefully cutting and filing this off. But it's the kind of subtle little clues that people will start to notice. Probably first very subconsciously, they won't quite notice it at first, but it'll feel different. It'll sort of say in the head, that looks like a Chaos Space Marine arm, but it's not. And then looking at something like this. Now, some parts of this are perfectly fine. So, you know, bayonet on the end, that looks very Night Lord. But, as you can see here, if I just show you, that is far too chaos for my liking. So again, I'm going to try and whittle that down. Ooh, this is the part I don't like, because it's a very small detail. And the problem is as well is it's kind of, it's pointing outwards to some extent. And you can see it kind of then folds into the metal of the gun, so it's like then indented downwards. So that's where my modelling putty is going to come in use. The green stuff's going to come in use, because what I'm going to do is once I've flattened that off, I'm then going to fill it with green stuff. Again, just filing away those little spiky bits that make it Chaos Space Marine rather than just a bit more gangland. I think when I get my 3D modelling skills up on Blender, I'm gonna maybe go and create my own personalised Night Lord gauntlets. Okay, that's starting to come along now. Obviously it's still a bit rough because I haven't filed it down yet, but there's our kind of starting point for these, getting the main bulk off, and then I'm going to just sort of try and start gently filing now. I do actually have a little miniature drill, admittedly, a little like fine detailed drill that I could actually sand these a bit easier with, but I've decided I want to do this so that, you know, you feel you can do it with even the most basic tools. So I could be using my special little drill here with the little tiny little sanding attachments, but I'm not gonna, because I want to, as I said, I want this to be accessible to anyone really. I don't even need a proper modelling file, obviously. A nail file would do. You can see I'm just starting to smooth that out now. Doesn't feel like I got it quite as neat as I should do that one. Again, just score along again with my knife just to make sure it's where it should be. because we really do want to make sure that that is nice and even and balanced. If you do make a minor mistake, you can actually fix it later on with a bit of modelling putty, so don't worry too much if you accidentally take a chunk out. You can just rebuild it with modelling putty later on. With this, I'm just trying to make sure that it's flattened down. Now, admittedly, that definitely feels too chaotic for my liking, so I am going to lob a bit of modelling putty in that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to grab a bit of modelling putty now that I've already pre-made. Now, a little bit of a tip with modelling putty I've found is that sometimes you might want to make it a few hours before. It doesn't dry that quickly, but when it's fresh like this is, sometimes it's very, very difficult to run it where you want it to run. Now, see, I've got my little tool here. I'm just going to very gently fill that along, just fill in the gap basically. Now, really, there are some details that I want kind of putting on that, but I'm going to let it dry first, and then when it's done, I can sand it down. So, particularly with the one that I'm doing right now, this video, there's going to be a bit of a pause, and then I'm going to leave everything, and then I'm going to literally come back to it probably tomorrow to do the next part, because I want it all to be dried down so that it's properly filled in those gaps. See, I'm really just making sure that I get it right in there. Normally I put some gloves on when I'm dealing with modelling putty as well, because otherwise you end up getting fingerprints in it, but I've run out of my gloves that I use, unfortunately. So I'm going to pick some up when I go Costco next. The problem is with modelling putty is just trying to get a tiny lump off is always a bit of a pain. So that's not quite as filled in as it should be. So these are a bog standard type of tool that you can find. You can either write in hobbying tool, green stuff tool, or dental tool, and you'll end up getting something like this showing up. Okay, so I've filled in those main areas now with this. That's great. Next thing I want to do is I want to kind of put a bit of studding on this guy's legs. So to do that, I'm going to get some modelling putty. Now you're going to see, it's going to be hard to see, but you can see I'm putting it on this base here. And I'm going to make these like insanely small each time. Okay, so I'm going to get these little small blobs of modelling putty. It's probably so small that it's very hard to get the on this. I'm going to roll them into a slight oblong. And then, oh, this is the hard part now. It's very carefully negotiating it onto this leg. And the number of times that I will drop this little thing in the next few seconds is unbelievable. But I want to kind of show you that We all make mistakes and it keeps happening, and I've lost it that time. No, I found it in. There it is. Right, I'm going to get this sod on. Go on. You got to imagine I've got to do like about 4 of these. Yep, there we go. Right. So the next part is trying to make sure that it kind of lines up nicely with that leg and sits on the leg instead of my thumb. Okay, there we go. Now, different ways you can do this. If you want a circle, obviously you've got to try and make that as circular as possible before you put it on. But that's why I say make it into an oblong. Okay, and you can just push downwards with something flat. And you can guarantee that damn thing will end up sticking to the wrong thing. Okay, and so careful matter of trying to reshape it. This is why I don't tend to do circles, by the way, because I really hate doing circles. Because what I actually want to do, because it's just more my way, and by the way, I found that if you wet the tool that you're using, it does actually help it not stick. Okay, and there we go. So that's a kind of little stud that I've created there. Now, if you're finding that thing is constantly falling off, don't worry. The idea is on this stage is to actually just make sure that it forms the shape of the place that you're putting it. So in this case, I want it to roll on the shape of the leg. If it keeps falling off, don't worry at this point, because later on you can just re-glue it. Now, one thing that I like to do with these guys though is I don't actually like circular studs. So what I'm going to do is I've wet my tweezer here, by the way, so it doesn't stick to the tweezer. And I'm just going to gently, very gently, right. Oh, I hate you. Go on. I'm trying to make it into a square because I prefer square studs. To reattach that, re-push it a bit. Fortunately, sometimes you'll find that you'll constantly have to reattach these things as you go in through. And, you know, with a bit of patience, it'll become the shape that you want it to go. Now, what I'll do is I'll let that set for a little while, and when it becomes a bit harder, so in a couple of hours time, as it's gained a bit of solidity, then I'll come back and reposition and re-squeeze it. It's just easier to do when it's a bit more dried up. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to run some of these studs all the way down the leg, which I'm going to admit that I am not going to actually do live on the video. I'll just stop the video now, go away and do them. But that's how you actually start doing your studs. Okay, so there we go. I've put some studs on the actual legs by now. I know they don't look great at the moment, but as I said, the best thing to do is let them dry a little bit, and then they're a lot easier to shape. And I'm just going to leave that to one side for now, and then I'm going to get a bit more green stuff, and I'm just going to tackle this head now. So at the moment, he's a nice baldy space marine. He's got a head plate on him just here as well. And what I want to do is I just want to give him a little bit of hair. So there's so many different potential styles you could probably do for gangs, and it's really about, I suppose, what you like. Obviously, one thing that tends to shout out Night Lord from what I've found is a kind of unkempt hair rather than particularly styled in any meaningful way. So what I'm going to start off with, but I'm also kind of conscientious that he's got a head plate on him. So because of that, I don't want to lose that head plate. So I'm going to get this green stuff right up to that plate. And that's going to start kind of developing his parting there. And then I'm going to start, hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to just pull it down at the back. And you can see I'm just kind of very, very slowly teasing it downwards. So I feel it's important that it's not really much of a design style for the Night Lords. They're not particularly inclined towards making effort. They'll either grow their hair long or they'll just probably let it grow out. They probably won't make much effort in style or particular appearance. So messiness is probably the key to this. So I want to feel that, you know what, Legion Discipline's breaking down. Any semblance of, soldier style practical cuts is just basically going away. And they're basically just not caring anymore. They're going to start maybe going back to gang styles. Kind of struggling to focus on this guy because of it. And that's really what I'm trying to go for there. I'm just literally trying to go for a very messy, unkempt kind of thing, something like you would expect a gang to kind of go for, but with the same logic, no real plan to the design of the hair. He's just growing it in whatever style he feels like, and he's quite happy to have it all messed up on his head. And I think that works really well for Night Lords. So partially grown out, not really making much effort. No, I think that looks rather nice for him. Okay, so now that I've let this settle for a bit and start to dry, I should be able to shape these a little bit more. So again, I don't want sort of circular rivets, as I've said. I want very square rivets. So the idea being, without it coming off, so this is the problem I said you can have by it, that you might find it best sometimes to let things fully dry and then put them back on later, re-glue them. Go back where you're supposed to be. And if that keeps happening, just sometimes damp your tool. You can see there what I'm doing is I'm slowly teasing it into more of a squared shape. If you're patient, you could probably even manage different shapes. In this case, I just want a nice square. Also possible, if you work hard at it and do it right, you'll be able to turn this into a point as well, and I have to admit points look really good. So that's all I'm doing at the moment. As you can see, I'm just finding my position, using my tweezers, just very gently squeezing it to get it into more of a squared shape. You can see that's looking rather nice now. If I had a load of spare shoulder pads, I'd even change those to squares. I'd really seriously consider, and it just gives a bit more uniqueness to your mini. So there we go, that's the actual, all the rivets done on the leg. I could go a bit further, I could really play around with it. I think on one of these I'm actually also going to kind of cut into this to actually make it look a bit different, but I promised myself that I wouldn't use my kind of power tools and specialist tools, so I'm just using what I've got to hand, and I don't want to cut that with a Stanley knife to do that job. But I will show you on a different model how to use the more advanced techniques. Okay, so now that we've got it all kind of how we want it really, you can see here my little hair's drying up now and starting to, yeah, there we go. So hair's all dried up now. Said it might not look you know, like styled, but it's not supposed to look styled, it's just supposed to look completely messy and unkempt. And then from there we're just, you know, building this thing like we would always do. Now this green stuff's still a bit wet, so I do have to be a bit careful while I'm doing this part. I don't know why I've decided to put that head on first, because that's just I can pull out a bit. Yeah, don't know why I'm putting that head on first, because I want to see how the arms settle first and then decide. So I think he works well putting his chainsaw downwards. It's more of a prone position. Then over this side. Oop. Doesn't do it. Come on, glue on safely. See, this is another tip that I'm going to give you right here and now. This is why you should never ever spray anything before you actually try and glue it, because it stops the actual melting process. Actually makes it significantly harder to glue on, because then the two halves of the glue aren't setting. Ooh. You'll find you'll do that a lot if you rush yourself. Can you see that I've smudged that all in his legs? I've really got to be careful when I'm putting things on, particularly when I've got wet green stuff that I'm working with as well. No. Well, that's drying there. I'm just going to scrape some of the paint off this. Just because, as I said, otherwise it's not going to bond properly. I know a lot of people like spraying stuff when it's still on the sprue, and I used to do it, and then I realised that when I was gluing miniatures it just did not allow them to glue properly. So even if you're doing sub-assembly, work out where your glue is actually going on the miniature, so that you don't end up painting where there shouldn't be any paint. Yeah, I think that position's okay. Looks like he's sort of in a more prone position, planning his attack rather than fully in attack mode. And settle his pads on. I'm going to try and source some Aquila armour helmets as soon as I can, because I really do like the idea of having a kind of heresy style armour on some of these. So if some of them do have heads, I'm going to kind of put those heresy armour heads on. I'm just doing his backpack now, getting it all prepared. That's the only thing I didn't cut off the sprue before and clean up ready. And a couple of last little bits here. I mean, careful not to tuck them anyway because of all of the different stuff. And that's it really. Now, I know there's a couple of bits left to do on the gun, but I'm going to wait for that to actually fully dry, that green stuff. And then it's just about adding a couple of score marks here and there so that I can obviously put where the different panels are. But other than that, that is my Night Lord conversion. There we go. Night Lord Tactical Marine. The chainsword and a bolt pistol.